I'd say that a conventional documentary image would almost always be in focus, otherwise what you're trying to convey wouldn't always appear apparent and clear.
A conventional image should have straight lines and a visual balance. Otherwise, it will confuse the viewer by giving an unusual viewpoint.
I'd say that most documentary images are done on quite a fast shutter speed because they need to be at least, I'd say, 60th. Yeah. This is to just ensure everything's clear.
If you're sticking to conventions within documentary photography, you would most likely stick to the blatant rule of having everything correctly exposed and evenly lit, thus not creating complication in the image.
Conventionally, photographers will get everything they want in the frame instead of cropping in post-production.
Possible camera shake from the photographer shows a lack of control.
I'd say that a documentary image with quite an obscure viewpoint would be quite unconventional because you can't shoot from laying on the floor or straight up above or twisting the camera to the side. It's just not familiar to what people want to see.
You would never see a documentary image to use out-of-focus techniques. This is due to documentary photographers having a lack of creativity. I think it was Juliet Margaret Cameron that said, "What is focus, and who has the right to say what focus is the legitimate focus?"
I think that an unconventional image within documentary photography can be deliberately under or overexposed to create a certain effect or mood.
If alternative processes work their way into documentary photography, then I'd see that as a kind of unconventional way of taking photographs, like cross-processing or lift.
Some photographers like to manipulate their subjects, move their surroundings, mix things up a bit. This is quite unconventional in documentary photography. I prefer to be in the moment, capture the moment as it is, not having to move anything. None of that unconventional stuff, moving things around. It's not what I do.
In documentary photography, you should never have a biased opinion. If you put your opinions into the image, it makes it unconventional.
We have chosen this particular image for our unconventional documentary photograph due to its different approach to technique and concept. On the Guardian website, Amanda Hopkinson said, "Many of his images are inhabited only implicitly. Presumably there is human life in the towering lit buildings and blurry traffic speeding over bridges and freeways. Even the still shots of diners and petrol stations visited only by late-night loners are more in the mood of the paintings of Edward Hopper than Robert Frantz's naturalistic photos of Americans. The interest is in the setting and composition." It was Kroner's more experimental work achieving the desired effects by using multiple exposures, restraining the camera shutter to allow maximum captured movement, then the intensification of black and white streaking through montage that provides his most iconic images. I see it as unconventional because it's almost like you see what the camera sees. You're experiencing the moment by being the camera.
I see this as an unconventional documentary photograph because using motion blur they are creating a stylistic image.
the image of the New York City skyline is out of focus, which makes it unfamiliar, although subliminally you still know what it is when you look at it, which I'd say makes it a successful, unconventional image.
In that image, it's the well-known landmarks, stripped down to its bare minimum. It's heavy black and white, creates drama.
Christopher Thomas did a series of photographs of New York City in the early hours of the morning. He used heavy black and white on Polaroid Type 55. We chose this particular image because it stuck to conventions so well. Douglas Stockdale said in a recent write-up on New York City Sleeps by Christopher Thomas, Thomas has chosen to take on a frequently photographed subject, the city of New York, a place that this Munich-based photographer lives part-time in conjunction with his professional photographic career. Because of New York's long history related to photography and art, it is in itself a potential cliché and daunting urban landscape subject. To look at New York anew, Thomas chose to work in black and white, specifically using the Polaroid Type 55 positive-negative film with a medium-sized view camera. So he chooses to photograph during the late evening and early morning hours, completing this project over a couple of years. His photographs are subsequently organised thematically: the city, bridges, riverside piers, parks and the neighbourhoods. In New York Sleeps, Christopher Thomas also photographed many historical landmarks of New York City, such as the Brooklyn Bridge, Times Square, Grand Central Station, and Central Park, all of which are composed in a very conventional way. These historical landmarks are photographed hundreds of times each day, and this is no different, apart from his use of heavy black and white on Polaroid Type 55 film.
By having no busyness in the streets, it draws your eyes to the building, which in this picture is the main focus and subject. By doing this, it sticks to conventions.
It's a conventional image because the building runs right through the middle of the frame, massive depth of field, all in focus. It's how your eye would see. It's a formal shot, square, precise. It's just great. Theoretician Joel Snyder said that a photograph shows us what we would have seen at a certain moment in time, from a certain vantage point, if we kept our head immobile and closed one eye.
I remember me and Bill Brandt being in the garden in my house and we were drinking tea and eating crumpets and stuff, talking aperture and shutter speed priorities, and he looked at me and he said, "I'm not into rules or conventions. Photography isn't a sport.